Welcome to Let's Talk About, brought to you by the Business and IP Centre Northeast and the British Library. In this series, we want to showcase the people behind the Business and IP Centre Northeast, which includes our expert in residence, library staff, our BIPC locals, as well as featuring local businesses who have benefited from using our services. Hello everyone, it's so nice to see you today. So we are having a very special episode where we are talking about green growth and sustainability. And I'm really excited to get stuck into this discussion because I feel like I'll learn a lot. And I know that anyone listening or watching will as well. So before we dive into that and have a chat, can you just share a little bit about yourself? So if we can start with you first, Ian.
Certainly, Ashleigh. My name's Ian Brown. I run a company called Chestnut Natural Capital in Ouseburn Valley here in Newcastle. And the business, I'm a farmer by background and have diversified pretty seriously, although I am on a city farm here in Newcastle, into a business which is going to get rid of oil-based plastics and replace those with plant-based alternatives. So Tree Guards is our first product. So that's my core focus.
That sounds really exciting, and I can't wait to explore with you and with ourselves as a discussion why sustainability is so important and how you've pivoted or diversified in some of that. So thank you. James, can you share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ashleigh. I'm James Staniforth. I'm the founder of Sustainable Business Services. We do what we say on the tin. We work with organisations to understand their environmental impacts, and we then work with them through a digital carbon dashboard to enable them to see their impacts, break that down, and to create short, medium and long-term goals to ultimately reduce to net zero.
Excellent. And that sounds like a dashboard I could certainly do with as well. And I think a lot of businesses are wanting to see what they can do to make small incremental changes and see how those changes add up to bigger differences. So perfect. And Paul, so nice to see you here as well. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business before we dive into sustainability?
Yeah, hi. My name's Paul Pringle. I'm the managing director of a company called Solarglide. We're a maritime company. We're based in Gosforth in Newcastle. We do blinds, window wipers, anything you can imagine for a ship window. And we export all over the world. And we're doing lots of things internally at the moment to change the way we do things in terms of sustainability. And it's really exciting for us. So that's us.
Perfect. Well, what better time to start than now to chat about sustainability? So when you hear the word green growth or sustainability, if we could just, all throw our opinions in here, what does it mean to you? Because it can sometimes feel like companies just do things to look good.
Yeah. I think it's leaving the world in a better place. I think as a farmer by background, I kind of get that. They always say you should live as if you're going to die tomorrow, but farm as if you can live forever. So I think that sort of ethos needs to be brought into everybody's daily life, really. I mean, there's far more technical ways of measuring it, but I do think that's an ethos answer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And for me, green growth, I guess, is a new concept. We always try to take it back a few steps with all the clients that we engage with and the people that we talk to bring it back to the climate emergency that we have, because that is the crux of why we do what we do, and certainly the passion that I have as an individual to try and educate and help people understand their various impacts both in business and in their own personal lives to take change, make change and take action, because we're at a point now globally where if we don't do that, we can see, climate change happening before our very eyes with high temperatures, higher sea levels, etc. So for me, the green growth element is a way of engaging with people that maybe aren't environmentally led to understand that actually taking on board some of the changes that they can make are actually good for business now as well.
Yeah.
For me, I was on board a cruise liner and we worked doing outfitting projects on big cruise ships, and I was totally blown away by the amount of stuff they were putting into landfill. They were literally chucking brand new chairs away. They were chucking stuff that was really in good condition, and rather than sort of giving it to somebody that would use it again, it was just put into these huge skips, and then it was so damaged that you couldn't use it again. And I think that was my turning point about 4 or 5 years ago when I was working on this particular ship, and I just felt that we needed to do something, and I felt that we were contributing as well with the packaging for our products, which were also in these skips at the same time, and we were using a lot of heavy plastics. So for me, that was the light bulb moment, and I thought I want to do something to make some changes here for the better.
I think I would want to get across that a lot of people are putting the debate across at the minute about it's either hedonism or hair shirt, and that we either have economic growth or we do this green stuff. It absolutely isn't. There is a third way forward, which is using the innovation and creativity that we have as human beings to actually come up with some really clever answers. And, there are plenty clever answers out there. I mean, as to when you do things, it's like tree planting. When's the right time to plant a tree? The answer's 30 years ago, which luckily I was able to. But if you can't do it 30 years ago, then doing it now is a good second option.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting to hear all of your perspectives on, green growth and sustainability and what it is and why it matters. I think I'm just curious. We often hear the terms reuse, reduce, recycle, sometimes in a different order, but there's only sometimes so much we can do with those things. One of the issues with sustainability as well can be production. So we've talked briefly there about plastics, but plastic production and making, releasing more plastic or creating more. And I know that, one of the things you'd said, Ian, is actually about reducing plastic and changing some of the ways you're using things. So can you share a little bit about that? How did you start to think about sustainability in your organization?
Yeah. Probably going right the way back to my tree planting of 30 years ago, when I was also bizarrely doing carbon footprinting 29 years ago. My brain was definitely thinking there's got to be a better way to do this, and I kind of focused in on farming. But every tree that I planted needed a round plastic tube, which I'm sure people have seen. Drive down the Western Bypass at the minute, or any big road scheme, you'll see plastic tubes. They're made from oil, they've got a big carbon footprint, but they're essential to protect the tree. So I got a group of people together, including the Centre of Process Innovation, and applied for an Innovate UK grant to actually look for an alternative. So we've found some biopolymers that are made from plants, basically just sugar, and we can turn that into a material that just feels and looks like polypropylene. So there are answers. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but then it's the secondary cost. Tree guards in the middle of nowhere, they're going to fall apart and put microbeads into the soil, and that's there for thousands of years. So there's got to be a compostable plant-based solution, which luckily we've found and got a patent on.
I love that you threw that you got a patent on that.
Yeah, just in case, always happy to share. Not my patents, though.
Excellent. And, in terms of James and Paul, I know you've actually worked together. So how did that come about? And, what about your individual journeys with sustainability as well?
It came about through the BIPC,
right.
Actually, where I am the environmental sustainability carbon footprint expert for the network. So we were approached via the network. I believe Paul was interested in furthering that journey that he'd already talked about.
Yeah, that was right. So it all came about through the BIPC, and we'd already started putting stuff in place, and I wanted to continue the journey, and it was quite weird that sort of James was there at the right time to sort of look at all sort of aspects of the business. I didn't actually know where we were on the terms of the carbon footprint. I wanted to sort of drill down a bit deeper to find out where we were. So it worked really well, didn't it? And we're continuing the journey as we speak. So yeah, James has been really helping us to sort of get our ducks in order. But we're really passionate about doing this. It's not just to tick a few boxes. It's to make a difference. And you helped us after we changed our packaging on our products completely, and it's made a huge difference. So
and sorry, Paul, and that's one of the interesting things. We speak to many businesses from a range of sectors all of the time who want to engage with us for different reasons, and it was fantastic to hear from Paul and the team there at Solarglide, in that they'd already made a load of changes themselves because they were passionate about the environment and making a difference and understanding what their impact is. And whilst there's a lot of noise out there about net zero, carbon neutral, climate positive, etc., for me, one of the fundamental starting points that enables everything is to understand what your impact actually is. And I know Paul and we've been talking about bees and keeping bees and different things, because that data and understanding can expand out into so many other things that are very important to fight climate change, such as biodiversity, etc.
Biodiversity is so important, and we hear this all the time. And I'm curious as well about, actually, Ian, you mentioned a city farm,
yes,
which is very rare. You don't often get that. We're very lucky that in the northeast of England, we have a city farm, and the Ousbourne is a beautiful area. So, Ousbourne Valley, you did say.
Yes.
But can you share what it's like to have a city farm, and how do you maintain biodiversity there?
Of course. We talk about care farming, and I've also managed to get some funding to do animal therapy for children from Newcastle, from some of the more deprived postcodes who were impacted by COVID, to actually come to the farm and use animals as a therapy to kind of get back on track with their education. So it's a fascinating place, and we say it's a wonderful place to grow. And by that we mean the plants, the animals, and indeed the people, most importantly. And it's a charity for that purpose. Set up as a community group. It was the Biker Farm back in the day of Biker Grove. It was the Biker Farm. And it's become Ousbourne Farm. And as I say, it's a charity connected to Tyne Housing. And biodiversity is really important. If you think of the journey of the Ousbourne Valley, I only found this out about a year ago. My family grazed animals under Biker Bridge in the 1880s, and I had no idea. I came to the farm for a job, didn't get the job, but did rent an office, got on the board, became chairman. So there's been a bizarre family history, but also the biodiversity of the valley. There was lead works there, and after 10 years of the farm, somebody tested the soil, realised it was full of lead. They probably thought it was quite heavy. It was very heavy because it was full of lead. So for a year and a half, the council closed the farm down, removed all the contaminated soil and replaced it. And since then, everything has been growing very healthily, and we have fields that are grazed, and people just don't expect it in the middle of a vibrant city like this. And the Ousbourne just has that lovely live, work and play element to it, which I think makes it the perfect balance. And I think other bits of the city could learn from it in terms of greenery. Because a number of bugs, those of us of an age used to have to clean our windscreens and our headlights. Everything is interconnected. So you might think, no bugs, don't have to clean the headlights. That's got to be good news. But actually, it's a warning sign from nature that we're disrupting one area, and that's likely to have a really big impact somewhere else.
It's a really important point, actually, about the cost to nature with some of the changes we've made with, the fast growth of, I think there's been so much technology in recent years, but just as the internet grows and the world becomes smaller in many ways and interconnected. But what about the cost to business? So, in farming, I can see a massive issue with the cost for biodiversity if we don't have that. But in terms of if we don't make changes to protect our climate, to protect our environment, to protect our businesses, what might the costs be if nothing is done? I wonder if any of you have any perspectives on that.
I think for me, the cost to business for inaction is going to be huge and is there now. We know that there are many public sector contracts now over 5 million that have a requirement for you to be able to demonstrate your commitments to net zero, and over time that will filter down to below the 5 million public sector levels, and also those businesses that are winning those contracts or tendering for those contracts, it's filtering down so that procurement process is one that will absolutely drive it. But we also see that employees, so the new Generation Z people coming out of university, are a lot more understanding of the environment and climate change, and they're looking for employers now to be able to demonstrate their commitments that fit with their own moral compass. So employees are going to drive this, customers are driving it. I look at everything now and ensure that it fits with my own moral compass and my values, etc. So it's coming from so many different areas now that if you're a business and aren't focusing on this, there is a big risk that over time your competitors are going to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And there's also a cost to our people as well. You know, the people who work for us, their lives, their livelihoods, you know, as you actually said, Ian, everything's interconnected, isn't it?
It is. It's no coincidence I've called my company, it'll be Chestnut Bio, but Chestnut Natural Capital is the limited company name. And natural capital, people think money when they hear the word capital, but so many of the answers to the world's problems are nature-based. So nature-based solutions is a phrase that's often used in the flood defense world. And it's saying, you know, we tried to navigate rivers and have concrete and steel, but actually the answer is wetlands and going back up to the top of the river catchment, working with the farmers and slowing the flow. So that's just one example, but I think nature-based solutions, so often nature does. You just have to look to design. Quite often, if you go back to nature, there's some brilliant solutions there that have taken a long time to come about, and we can just take those ideas, yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of nature, so we've spoken a bit about biodiversity and agriculture, but from water and, you know, and that's a huge natural resource. So in terms of the maritime industry or just, you know, the work you're doing, what innovations or trends are you seeing that, you know, are either exciting you or worrying you, or what is happening around green growth?
Okay, so the maritime industry is the biggest polluter in the world by a long shot, and that's because we trade a lot of goods everywhere. The ships leaving every port as we speak, every second of the day, and the amount of emissions that go out into the environment are huge. So I am excited about it because I am seeing a massive shift, particularly in the cruise sector and ferry sector, where they're trying to do a lot on sustainability and change the way they think about absolutely everything. So there's a lot of new exhibitions coming up at the end of the year in London, which I'm going to be attending on sustainability that's specifically based in the industry. So that's exciting. The commercial side, I'm not hearing as much noise from these guys, but hopefully they'll start to, their ears will perk up when they start to see other people involved. But yeah, I think we've got to do something because of the fact we are the biggest polluter. I'm saying it as if it's me, but it's actually the industry that I work in. But yeah, I think things are steadily changing. They're thinking about the way the materials are used for making yachts, the energy that they get on board and how they get that without using huge amounts of fuel. The amount of stuff that they put back into the ocean, because ships are renowned in the past for putting waste into the sea when they're far out at sea, and it's potentially harming sea life. But they are definitely all talking about it now. It's really, really good to see, and I think that's really only come about in the last sort of 5 years. But they were kind of talking about it before it started becoming headline news as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to be part of it, and we're trying to do our little bit as a small supplier to the industry to make changes that are going to be have a huge impact on our customers.
And to be fair, putting something on a ship often has a far lower carbon footprint than flying. So, you know, certainly there's a lot of people need to take responsibility for transport, you know, generally. Right. But there are solutions, yeah.
It's really interesting to me, actually, what you've said there, Ian, because a lot of people that I've been chatting to recently have been sharing that they, you know, going to give up their car and not drive anymore because they can cycle or walk or get a train and that to me is quite a shift, because I feel that there are so many cars on the road now, you know, that you see all the time. And I think it's really interesting that people are starting to explore alternative ways of doing things in our day-to-day life, not just in our businesses. But I would also want to ask if anyone has any comments on this about the power or the importance of education. So, you know, in this instance, you know, James, you were sharing that you're a guest expert with the BIPC. You're able to support businesses to look at their carbon footprint, how they could do things in a or clean or green way. But actually for many people, it's still something they're learning. And, one of the things we see is there's a lot of jargon out there. So even in this episode so far, we've chatted about, net zero and your carbon footprint. And so could you share in some simple terms, for anyone listening or watching, what some of those terms mean, or maybe some of the key terms you find businesses get stuck on?
Certainly one of the biggest barriers that we have is jargon. There's a perceived cost and time to businesses that may put them off, but when we talk to them around the actual value that this can build into their business and the narrative that they can share with clients, they get that they can see the value of that. But the jargon piece, I guess it's like anybody not working in an industry, it becomes quite difficult when there are so many different terms around carbon neutral, net zero, and all of those other associated ones. Net zero is a term that the government's effectively pledged everybody to. The UK government made a pledge that the UK as a nation will be net zero by 2050. Net zero effectively means in its basic form that is zero emissions associated to everything that you do, as a company, an event, an individual, a country. So that is from the microphones to the clothes that we're wearing now, whereas carbon neutral only quantifies a certain element of the emissions associated to a business. So the net zero element is more far-reaching as such, but also based on the conversations that we've had, we know that the technologies aren't there for everything, and people are in financial arrangements that mean they can't make certain changes, etc. So to get to net zero, there is a process that we follow that is that remove carbon from every element that you can, but there will be some residual emissions that you potentially can't, which is where a certain element of offsetting can be used by organisations and individuals also to get to that net zero point. But our ultimate goal is to remove carbon.
I think I attended a lecture recently on timber production, and they were talking about the changes that were coming in timber, and I was completely shocked because I didn't realize how powerful timber is and how it can reduce so much carbon. It gave me a massive idea even for my own podcasting studio, because we use sound treatment insulation that's made of steel wool. And so to be able to use timber instead, it absorbs carbon and it's more environmentally friendly. But we've already got certain panels and things in place. So rather than just throw them away, we want to still use the ones we've already got. But going forward, we would use alternative materials. And I think that's a really important thing is, just because you've got, say, existing plastic in your home or existing things that you use in your business doesn't mean you have to immediately get rid of it if it would cause more environmental harm. There are ways that you can go forward with new ideas.
I was at that same lecture, the Goldman lecture by Paul Brannan, and I think there was a couple of things came out of that. One was that by building in wood, you can embed carbon. So growing a tree is great for the 30, 40, 50, 60 years or more that it grows. It sucks up carbon dioxide, but then if you burn it in a power station, that just releases it again. So hence the biggest power station in Britain at Drax is looking to actually capture that carbon. So when they burn it and release the carbon, they'll actually try and turn it into a liquid and pump it under the North Sea. Now that's technology that's not here yet, great if it works, but the more intelligent thing to do is to use a lot less concrete and steel. And I think from a carbon point of view, Paul put up a graph which really hit me between the eyes. If concrete was a country, it would be the third biggest country in the world in terms of its carbon footprint. So, it's so easy to just build cities out of concrete, but we could be using, again, nature-based solutions. Yeah.
The other thing, just on that note from that that lecture that was really powerful was the importance of natural-based resources in regards to our health and well-being. So they did some testing with kids who were in schools, in concrete sort of schools, or traditional schools made out of concrete or steel, and then schools where they were made out of timber. And actually many kids were better in terms of their mental health and well-being. There was something about the nature and being surrounded by natural elements, and I think that's so interesting that if we use more natural resources, then that's a perspective I'd never explored before.
And hospitals, even dental practices, pictures of trees, bizarrely, they use 5% less anaesthetic. Who knew? So nature can have a huge impact. The new campus that's going to be built at Ashington will be I think they're calling it a Gen Zero build, and there will be a lot of wood, and it will be built very much with the learning environment at the fore, but also the materials that it's built of. And I think that sends a powerful message. And also green growth means there's going to be a huge amount of jobs in the future based on the changes that we're going to have to make in order to save the planet, very literally.
Wow, I'm finding all of this so exciting to hear about. And before we wrap up, I'd love to know if each of you could share a top tip that you love to share with people, like if there was one takeaway they could have from this episode, but also the thing you're most excited about when it comes to green growth and sustainability. So we can start with you, Paul.
Yeah, speaking as a small local business, I just want to say that it's quite easy to make changes to make a big impact. We briefly mentioned that we changed all our packaging in the business, and we realised we were packaging our stuff in very thick plastic, and it looked great. It was all branded. It looked fantastic, but at the other end, it was just being cut open and then put straight into landfill. And the types of plastics we were using were not easy to recycle, so they were going maybe into landfill or being burnt or whatever sort of means they do for the recycling process of these plastics. So we changed our bubble wrap to biodegradable bubble wrap. We've got recycled sleeving that we use made of cardboard and paper rather than plastic. We use cardboard edging, everything you can think of that could basically be put into recycling and be reused again. And everybody thinks when you think, oh, well, it's biodegradable, it's going to cost the world. And it actually doesn't. It doesn't at all. It's a little bit more expensive at the moment because it's not readily adopted. But for the extra money, it's worth it, because you really are making a huge impact, not only locally but internationally as well, because our products go all over the world. So for any small businesses, I would say start looking at small things in the business, such as packaging is one of the first areas to start with, because it's really easy to implement. And then that'll start your journey, is to look at every other aspect in the business of what you can do to change everything. And that's kind of what me and James are doing at the moment. Every time we get together, we think of different things that we can do, and then we focus on them. So each and every time we do something, the next step is to do something else. And as a company, you can start to really change all of your processes to become more sustainable.
Perfect, thank you.
And I think on the back of what Paul mentioned there, and actually the point that we've just touched upon, I think the biggest thing for me is talking and educating people about this. There are so many things that we can all do, and there are some no-cost first steps that we can do that are relatively easy, that, in the times that we're having now, don't cost anything at all. Little things at home, spending less time in the shower, switching the lights off, just being more conscious of everything that we do, walking more, cycling more, that also has the mental health benefits, as well as saving you some money and saving the environment. So for me, the biggest takeaway, and sometimes when we speak to clients, they say, well, I don't really want to talk about it. I don't want to be seen to be bragging about something. And I say, no, it's not bragging. It's helping others understand that actually there are benefits to making the changes that you are, in the hope that they can also realise the same benefits. So the biggest one for me is talking.
I like that.
Well, James and Paul both right in what they say. It's about saving the world, not costing the world. And For me, it's about being your own disruptor. So I think challenging yourself and what you do and those people closest to you in business and in family life, and just challenging, why do we do it? As human beings, it's very easy to get into habits. Some are good, some are bad. And it's looking at those bad environmental habits and kind of changing them. And there's plenty of advice here to come and get, much of it free of charge. So why not take advantage of that knowledge and the grant funding that's also out there to make the changes that are good, for one and all. And I think I'm just excited that, having spent my whole career around sustainability, that my time has come, and the time at the very last minute. The world is so slow at moving on this. So let's hope that collectively we do move and solve this very big problem and conundrum just in the nick of time.
I agree, and absolutely, just in the nick of time, and collectively, together we can make small steps and create big differences. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming in today.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Talk to our green growth experts and explore why it's important that local businesses should consider green and sustainable practices in their growth strategy. This podcast series is being brought to you by the Business and IP Centre Northeast and the British Library, produced by Flamingo Heights Studio, and I've been your host, Ashleigh King. To help the show grow, subscribe and leave a rating wherever you're listening.